All right, Falcon family, welcome back. We are here with a near dear friend of mine, Mrs. Terry Reilly. She is my former principal of Edgewood High School. I'm so ecstatic to have you here and to do this interview. We keep in contact. You've helped me and are a mentor to me in this profession. So I'm so grateful for you today for doing this interview, Mrs. Reilly. We're going to jump right into the first question. Tell the people a little bit about your current job title, like what are you currently into? And just explain that a little bit for everybody.
Sure. So I retired in 2013 after 33 years in Harford County Public Schools. And I retired because my dad was ill and I needed to spend some time with him. And when he passed, I went to work for New Teacher Center, which is a national nonprofit which supports mentors and teachers new to the profession. And that was some national work. And it was really cool to see. I worked a lot in Miami and in New York City, a little bit in Arizona, a little bit in Iowa. And it was interesting to see how different school communities function, what the plans are, and the support looks like for beginning teachers. And it let me be in schools because that's my favorite place to be, is around kids. I retired from that and really had planned to stay retired. I was hoping it would stick. And last year I got a call from my former supervisor in Harford County who said they needed a literacy coach at Edgewood High School and just somebody to sub in for the remainder of the school year. And Edgewood High School is near and dear to my heart. I taught there. I was an administrator there. I met my husband there. So I jumped at that chance. And then COVID hit. And so that 4-month job has turned into a 1.5-year job supporting teachers, supporting the grant work, which is a federal grant, and that's wrapping up in June. And it really has been an interesting experience because never in my career, never in any of our careers have we experienced anything like this last school year.
Yeah, it's been rough, and I think your career path has been. You speak about it so like, cavalier, but I mean, you made some tremendous contributions to, I know the Edgewood community. So it means a lot for you to, and then come back. Man, that has to be like coming full circle, isn't it?
It really was. I mean, I started, I don't even want to say the year, Michael, but a long time ago at Joppatown High School and came in and I went to Catholic school my whole life. I mean, that was very important to my parents. And my mom was a public school teacher, but that was all I knew of public school. And so it really was a reality shift for me and a way for me, not just to be a teacher, but to be a learner. And I think that was a great way to start because I've tried to stay a learner my whole career. So yeah. It was coming back home in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and it's like a new building. So it's like, the old building, they tore that down and, Edgewood High School has this brand new, like I drive by there and I'm like, looks like a futuristic, but the middle school's still old, but they had the elementary and the high. So it's a totally different vibe going there.
It is, and it's funny because you remember the old Edgewood High School was so spread out, and I can remember, I'd be in the cafeteria and they'd say somebody needed somebody on that back hall or on the back parking lot, and man, you were just it was one level, but it was going, and now it's 3 stories and steps, boy, lots and lots of steps, but it's a beautiful building and just a lot of cool opportunities for kids in that building.
Right. Awesome. So tell me a little bit about, your childhood, your upbringing, how you grew up, and what you were like in high school. Because I don't think a lot of people will probably know that.
You made me tell tales. So I grew up in Baltimore County in Parkville. My mom was an elementary school teacher in Baltimore County Public Schools. My dad worked for BG&E, and they were really a good example of opposites attract. I mean, my mom was really like this super focused student, always was taking classes. And my dad got tossed out of school in the 8th grade because he was ornery, very ornery. And until he passed at 83, very ornery. I came by that honestly. But really a very strict upbringing, and Catholic education was really important to both of those. So I went to St. Ursula, and then went to John Carroll, actually, up here in Harford County for high school. And I was really passionate about schoolwork, and probably too much, like too intense as a high school student. I think one of the things, I tried to take all the challenging courses. I really tried to push myself. We didn't have a lot in advanced placement back in the 70s, but there were a few. But I just really pushed myself. And I think older, wiser me looks back and wished I would have taken a breath from time to time, maybe. Because I think even, and I'm sure you see some of our really strong students take such a heavy load, and they put so much pressure on themselves. And while a little bit of pressure is a good thing, I mean, I think we have to learn how to deal with stress. I do think sometimes we can go over the top with that.
I agree. And that doesn't surprise me that you were this top flight student that was trying to achieve the very highest that you possibly could. I mean, that is not surprising at all. So what made you get interested in, was it your mom? Like, what got you interested in wanting to be a lifelong educator, getting involved in this career?
I think at first it was my mom. I mean, I played school when I was little, my poor brother, but I was a teacher. I had a blanket on my head because I was a nun, because it was Catholic school, right? But I used to go to school with my mom and help her do her bulletin boards, help her set up her room. And so I really wanted to be a teacher. And then my junior year in high school, I had a teacher, Sister Rita Walke, who was probably one of those pivotal teachers for you, who was just such an inspiration for me and taught me to really love literature and love writing. And so she's what kind of pushed me in the direction of really wanting to major in English, and then hopefully get kids to love teaching as much as I did.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It's always usually one pivotal person, regardless of whatever it is you decide to do, that kind of pushes you, in that direction. And I come to find out after all of these years, for me, as far as getting involved in knowing what kind of school leader I wanted to be, you kind of set that tone for me. I never forget. You probably don't remember this, but there's a situation where you always call me in the office for good stuff, people. But you call me in the office to talk to me, and I can remember how weird that was, because I'm like, wow, okay, she's calling me in just to have a personal conversation. And you used to say, Michael, this is going on in school. How do you feel about that? Or this is what I heard or whatever. And I'm like, wow, it just showed me what that was really about. And I kind of kept that in my back pocket, so to speak, all the way through till now. So I carry a little bit that with me as we go forward and here at Wintersmore High School. So I don't know if you knew that or not, but I have to share that with you.
You make my heart happy, Michael. I think it comes back to, it's all about students, right? And I think leaving the classroom, it was really hard for me not to have that daily one-on-one with relationships and just knowing kids so deeply. And while the adults are clearly important in the building, it's all about kids. And so finding out, I used to love to do cafeteria duty most days, not every day, but, just as a way to sit down. I mean, you can tell, and I'm sure you know this today. You can walk in the cafeteria and just if the volume's off or the vibe is off, mm-hmm. You can know something's up or something's not up or what's going on. And it just gave me a way to find out what was important and, what mattered. And students will be brutally honest with you. And that's a good thing,
right.
Because I think that helps you to know what we're doing well and what we need to change.
Right. Well, like I said, you're one of those people for me. So I had to say that. So what did it take for you to get to where you were as far as your career and accomplish all the things you accomplished? what kind of special schooling and those type of things did it kind of take for people that may want to follow in your footsteps?
So, I majored in English and secondary ed, and it was interesting because Loyola at the time didn't really have a secondary ed program. So we had to go over to Notre Dame because that was more a women's college, and there were more teachers because it was a women's college back in the 70s. And so, I did, and it was interesting because the Notre Dame students all went to private schools for their placements, and I went to Stemmers Run Junior High, and that was. At the time I was a little scared, I'll be honest with you. I mean, I was 20 years old and I didn't know public school, and I didn't know, Essex and Dundalk. And, I went home and said to my dad, I'm going here. And he went, oh, okay. And I thought, oh, geez. But it was an amazing experience to get to, understand kids are kids in every single building, and to know, what matters, and a good teacher matters in every single building. Mm-hmm. I went on and did my master's in reading because I tended to gravitate to working with a lot of students for whom English was a struggle. And I thought, if I could get a master's in reading, that would help me to support them as readers. Right. And then I did my certification. I never really wanted to be an administrator at first, I'll be honest.
The best ones never do.
Well, but I kind of got pushed, and I became an assistant principal, and then went back in the classroom. I became a principal, and it was like, yeah, this isn't really for me. And I went back in the classroom, and I kind of did that little hopscotch all through my career. And looking back, I'm really glad I did, because I do think the cumulative experiences and, the longer you're out of the classroom, you can forget the pressure. You can forget, what it's like to post grades and get 80 emails from parents. Yeah. And just, I think it helped me to stay grounded in terms of what was really important.
Yeah. And I guess your teachers and staff had to kind of love that, right? Because you're coming back and you're like, hey, I'm your principal. Weren't you just an English teacher or reading teacher last year? You'd be like, yeah, I was. But, this is what I'm doing now. So you really, that had to have been big for your staff to kind of see you in that light and kind of bounce back and forth. I think that would be a positive thing for them.
I think it also, one of the words, as I was looking at these questions ahead of time and kind of thinking about what we were going to talk about, the word that kept coming back to me was balance. And I believe very firmly as a school leader and as a teacher that if you make a decision in the best interest of students, you can always defend it. Mm-hmm. That being said, I think you also have to take care of the adults in your building. Right. And I will admit readily that's hard for me. There are times I really wanted adults to act like adults, and I struggled. And I didn't have the patience. I have all the patience in the world with a ninth grader. And with a 38-year-old teacher, I struggled sometimes. And I think older, wiser me now knows I could have done a better job of that. I could have really been more, because if you take care of the teachers in the building, they'll take care of the kids. Right. And I think that's something I learned over time.
Yeah. It's hard. It's a tough job. I don't think people realize it's a very, very difficult job. I tell people, being a principal, especially during COVID, but even on a good day, is one of the more difficult jobs in America. And I tell people that because it just is. There's a lot happening. Even, before this interview, there's 90 different things that's happening that you have to kind of, take care of simultaneously, along with, those personal things that happen with staff and personal things that happen with kids. And it's just everything. So you're far more than just an educator. You're a counselor. You're a confidant. You're a lot of different things, all rolled into one, and that can burn people out. If you're definitely giving it your best. So I can see that, but I don't think that some people are gonna be watching this and be like, man, she was terrible. I know you were awesome and great for us because of the heart that you had did in the same thing, being able to self-reflect and say, hey, I could have did this better. There's not a lot of people that's going to say that when they're all said and done. They're like, hey, I was good, and that's just you could take it and leave it, buddy. That's just how it is. But for you to even say that tells me a lot about you as a person. So what was the most difficult thing, for you in your career? Like being a job, we could talk about the job you have now, since you've had so many. What's the most difficult thing part of your job now, since we're in this COVID season, and what's the most rewarding?
So a lot of the work that I've been doing in the past year has been supporting first-year teachers, and a number of teachers who were on conditional certification. So, and that's, I think about how hard it is to be a first-year teacher, and to also be a first-year teacher who, might have the content degree, but doesn't have all the pedagogy. And so that means not only am I teaching, and I'm teaching things that are new, and I'm getting to learn this whole teaching gig, I'm also taking classes at night, which is hard. And so I think the hardest part for me has been, and I've practiced this a lot, I've worked really hard to hone my skill around listening and not trying to be a fixer. Yeah. Because I think, you don't want to create a mini me. I don't need to create somebody who's just, here's a Terry Reilly 30 years later. Helping a teacher to find his or her own voice, his or her own strengths, his or her own persona in the classroom. Because I think that's so good for kids too, to learn how to navigate and negotiate all those different personalities. So that's been hard, to be a listener, and especially in COVID. It's been easier a little bit during remote learning because I've never done it. And so it's an opportunity to think together about what might work. And, whereas if we're in a more traditional ninth grade English classroom, I know 47 things that'll work. And this, it's like, yeah, we can try that. What do you know your kids better than I do, and what might it look like? And so that's been both hard and rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, you have so many different avenues in your career. I had to focus in on that. What's the most difficult? But I would say, some of those same things. It's this COVID situation has made things that kind of can be routine be difficult. So I tell people right now, you talk about heroes. I was like, every teacher in this building is a hero for me, for everything that they've had to go through over this past calendar year. This today being like the anniversary of COVID. They've been around the world and back, so to speak. So I really value all of them, and definitely all the teachers that's in your building, and yourself, for everything that you're doing for our kids. This being Women's History Month, the reason why we're doing the interview, what, from a woman's perspective, right? And like I said, you grew up in this, 70s on till now. Have you had to deal with, any type of gender-related issues growing up as you transition into all the different careers that you've had? Like, have you noticed anything?
Definitely. I think it was always accepted and perhaps even encouraged for women to become teachers, right? If you were going to work outside the home, teaching is what women should do. The interesting thing was that as I started looking at leadership opportunities, so we're talking, really in the 80s, it was, especially at the high school level, it was very male dominated, very white male dominated, quite frankly. And I think, even just becoming a department chair, well, that's been Mr. So-and-so. Okay. So the whole department's women, but Mr. So-and-so is the department chair. Right. And I think even as you got up, my last position in Harford County Public Schools was at central office. And I think even at times there were gender differences in terms of, the questions you would be asked, or, if you tended to be very passionate or very strong in an opinion, there might be an epithet that came your way as a woman that would not come that way. And that's just Mr. So-and-so being Mr. So-and-so. You as a woman, where that was not as expected or not as accepted of a woman.
Right.
In our profession, as you know, Mike, there aren't the salary discrepancies that there are. I think, pay is public. And so I think if you and I are both principals in Carroll County, we're making the same amount depending on our education. But I do think, there was a glass ceiling. Women were teachers, and I think to push into leadership roles, and that's changed dramatically. I mean, we've had a couple women superintendents up here. I do think that is changing, but for a long time, education, especially at the top, was very male dominated.
When you became principal, were there a lot? I mean, stuff that I don't pay attention to when you're a student. Were there a lot of female principals at that time? Like, were you one of the first? Like, how did that whole situation go?
There was one principal, a one-woman principal who had been an AP at Edgewood, Doris Williams, and then I was the second. And now there are two women who are principals. So not a whole lot more. Not a lot has changed in 30 years. But no, there were not a lot. There are far more women assistant principals, because there weren't even that many of them. I mean, there used to be some thinking about how can we get a woman in every building as an assistant principal, and we couldn't even do that initially. I mean, so I think that's changed.
Wow. So it seems like you might have yet another career when you get done with this, which is, you could be an advocate for women administrators in the state of Maryland. Like, I can see you in Annapolis right now, like pounding.
No, Michael, stop giving me more jobs. No, thank you. No, thank you.
So with everything that you've done and accomplished, what still gives you motivation? Like, and who's a hero, who has been a hero for you in your life?
So I sat with this question and kept coming back to it from the time you sent me these questions. And I don't know that I can say one person. I really don't. I think about people who are in the news. Like, I'm fascinated by Stacey Abrams and all that she is able to do in terms of voting rights. I go back to Sister Rita, who for me was just such the model of a compassionate, brilliant educator. And I think about my mom all the time. I do think about my mom. But to be honest, I think about a lot of my students. And, I just, over the course of my career, just so many students who have overcome adversity that I haven't had any of that. I mean, I've led such a privileged life in so many ways. And that doesn't mean it hasn't been without challenge, but I mean, I still keep in touch with a student from Edgewood who, was a mom in ninth grade and was navigating that and was working a job. And, we still run into each other from time to time. And she now has a couple of kids who are sadly grown. They're adults themselves. She's probably a grandmother now. And I just think, to stay in school, to accomplish, to go to college, to get a great job, that's something that I don't know that I've never had that kind of adversity in my life. I can't even imagine.
Yeah. But it also has to feel good that, you were a part of some of these kids and making them the individuals that they have become. Because, I mean, without you, it could have gone in a different direction. You never know.
It's hard to know. And I think that comes back to, kids I can remember I called a mom once who was very frustrated with me. We were kind of on speed dial when I was an assistant principal. And she said, I cannot leave work. I lose money if I leave work. And she said, and I said, well, we really need to talk to each other. Tell me what time you get off work. I'll stay. And I mean, at the time, that student was in ninth grade, and I met with the mom at 7:00 at night after dinner. And that was a turning point in our relationship, because I think, you have to meet folks where they are. And that's really hard. It's easier now. I mean, I think we have so much more virtual world. I mean, back then, heck, we didn't even have cell phones. But just being willing to say, I'll stay. Your child's that important to me that I'll stick around. I've got stuff to do. I'll see you at such and such time. If you kind of put yourself in that position where, I mean, Mike, I'm not a parent. And so I can't imagine, what some folks are dealing with. And so to say, sure, I'll stick around. How can I help you? If you come from that position, that place of, how can I help? I think that's a good starting point all the time.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. And then you being able to this job is so grinding. However, if you show kids that you care and you go the extra mile, and for kids, they know your work hours more than anybody else. So they're like, yeah, they ain't gonna be there after 3 o'clock, and you're like, okay, meet me at 7. They're like, 7 o'clock? Really? Oh, she must really. Okay, well let me see what she's really about. Let me hear what she's talking about. So they know, and I think they sense that. So I think that's awesome. Um, so going back to women, do you think women have progress over the years, Mrs. Reilly? Like, or do you think that there's still more work to be done?
So I would say absolutely there has been progress and there's still a tremendous amount of work to be done. I mean, I looked up pay inequality to get ready for our conversation, and in 2020, women made on average 81 cents to a man's dollar. Well, that's just not right.
Right.
Come on now. That is
Right.
just, I don't even know how you justify that. And so I think there is a tremendous amount of work to be done. And I think we're positioned to do that. And I think part of that is women have found their voice and are organizing and are strong. And so it's not a lone voice. It's not just a solitary voice. It's a more powerful coalition. And the other good part of it is I think we have lots of men like you who are willing to listen to women, who are willing to elevate women, mentor women, support women, and grow women into careers and positions that perhaps were once reserved for men.
Yeah, I do. I think that is the big difference that I see is the advocates for women. I see that growing. And what I want to do with this series is again to shed light to women. And a lot of times, like some people don't even know it's Women's History Month. They have no idea. They have no idea, right? So even this series itself, we need to do more of that. We need to showcase women, all the things that they've done and gone through. We study other parts of history, but kind of sometimes women's history is kind of like left out or not talked about. Their contributions to our society is kind of like, shuffled to the side. And that shouldn't be. We should focus in on that, whether, we're in school, so forth. So other kids know, other girls that are growing into women know how strong and what they can actually be in life. And that's really what it's really about. Because if you don't know what you can actually be from a little girl, then, now if you think as a little girl, there's nothing that I can't do, man, you're gonna be powerful when it's time for you to become a woman. So yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I was watching the Today Show. I want to say it was maybe the first day of Women's History Month, and at the time there was only one woman 4-star general in the armed forces, Jacqueline von Ovost in the Air Force.
Yeah.
And she talked about the importance of firsts and onlys, and just what kept resonating for me was you need to see it to know you can be it.
Yeah.
And to she kind of forged that path without anybody to model for her. And I think, we have Kamala Harris now. When I see Amanda Gorman, when I see just all of these women, all the women senators, Elizabeth Warren, you see people that help I can have a voice in our government. I can have a voice in our system, is something that's very different from when I was growing up and even when you were growing up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's different. It's different. Like I said, and like, I see, definitely more women of power, more women in prominent roles. So I think, like you're talking about, that cusp, being on the cusp, that wave that's there, and you being able to get over that wave. I think women are definitely on the cusp of that. You just gotta keep the ball rolling, so to speak.
Yes.
So what does Women's History Month mean to you? Did you? Because some people, like I told you, they don't know it's Women's History Month. Do you like? He wants me for Women's History Month. This is what's really going on. I'm sure you probably knew, but what does it mean to you?
So I think, so I have mixed feelings. In part, it's a time to represent. I think it is a time to highlight. I think it is a time to really make very clear and obvious and say the quiet part out loud about all the things that women have done and continue to do and potentially could do within our country and within our society. It does make me a little mad. And I will tell you that, much like Black History Month, it shouldn't just be a month. I mean, it needs to be all of the time. And so, we used to have to, back in the day when I taught English, we had to turn in, what did we do for Black History Month? What were the activities we did? And I really raged against that quietly at the time because I was a teacher. But I think that those are things we need to do all the time. I think we need to highlight phenomenal authors, to phenomenal women, phenomenal scientists all of the time. That needs to be, we need to really look at our curriculum and be sure that kids can see themselves, within, like, some of the grant work that I'm doing right now. We're really trying to diversify the canon in terms of what we're teaching within English language arts classrooms, right, and have all kinds of literature, but representation is critical in that.
That's just going to be, I feel like that's just going to be a super huge piece of how we change from this pandemic, especially in education, on curriculum and instruction. How are we going to change that as a country on what our kids should be learning about America and in general? And yeah, like you said, it doesn't need to be certain things. It doesn't need to be just like a little blurb or a little chapter. Like, we really need to dive in and really start looking at, our curriculums and making sure they're as robust as possible for our students to learn everything, not just bits and pieces, but they need to learn it all. And there's so much to learn, but there's also so much information that's out there now. And I tell kids all the time, you have been born into the golden era of information. And I'm like, how great of a time can it be? Because
also the golden age of disinformation.
Yeah.
And so I think it's helping kids know how to navigate that, right? And figure out. But I just, like, the 6 words of education that make my blood boil are, we've always done it that way. Mm-hmm. And the pandemic has kind of forced us to a degree out of that box because we've never done this before. But we have to teach Romeo and Juliet because we've always taught Romeo and Juliet. We have to, we've always done this. We've always done that. And I just think, we're preparing kids for careers that don't even exist yet. And so I believe in the power of a really broad and robust, to use your word, liberal arts education. And let's also find ways to develop kids' critical thinking skills rather than this finite bit of information, memorizing these facts. Let's teach kids how to be good consumers of information. Let's teach them how to find facts, because there are things they're going to learn that are new to us too. Right. We're not the keepers of the knowledge.
No, we're not. And like you said, for all the kids out there is fake stuff out there. So don't think that, when you go on Wikipedia, wherever you are, that everything that's there is 100% factual. There's a lot of disinformation that's out there, especially you guys that watch YouTube videos. Just because you have a YouTube video doesn't make you an expert on anything. It just means you have a YouTube video.
Exactly.
That's all it really means. So you don't check the credentials of the person that's coming out with the YouTube video. You should, but anybody.
That's part of what we've got to teach is how to really, how to verify your sources, how to be good consumers of information.
Right. Agreed. So I got one more question before I let you off the hot seat.
All right.
Because kids are going to be watching this and everything else, I just have to ask you, you talked a little bit about your upbringing and everything else. If you had to go back and talk to your 17-year-old self, what would you tell her? Would you tell her something crazy? Like what would be the conversation?
So I think part of my intensity as a student was also lots of wanting to please my parents. And I really was a pleaser in terms of, I wanted my parents to be happy. I wanted my teachers to be happy. And then the dark side of that for me was a very competitive streak. And so I was very competitive as a student. And sometimes when you're competitive, that means you hold all of your toys and all of your balls and all of your knowledge really closely, and you don't really share. And so I think I would tell 17-year-old me to be more of a team player and to be more of a collaborator. Because I think, that even, Mike, I saw that as I became, a leader. I was not as willing to delegate because I had in my head, it's easier to do it my way. I think I can do it more efficiently. I know how to do this. And that doesn't do anybody any good. I mean, it's not good for morale. It's not good for getting other thought processes into, the barrel, so to speak. And so I think I would have told 17-year-old me and probably 30-year-old me and maybe even 40-year-old me to really take the time to collaborate, because sometimes, and this will sound trite, but you have to go slow to go fast. And sometimes I think if you're willing to put the time in and listen and hash it out, the product is far better than you could have done on your own.
Yeah, it's really about that vulnerability and usually being vulnerable. That's hard. That's hard to do, the trust and all that. Like that's different, easier said than done. But I find if you do that, then not only are you going to make yourself a better individual, but also the individuals around you are going to be able to learn and grow as individuals. So that's big. And you talk about being competitive. Now, I got to say this before I let you off. Your husband and I'm still mad about this, by the way. Let everybody know. I coming up in middle school, my brother was a little bit older than me. So he got coached by your husband. And I used to go to football games, everything else. And I just wanted to be an Edgewood Ram and play football for your husband. That was like the only thing I really wanted to do. I get there. He goes to Aberdeen, which everybody doesn't know. Let me tell you something. Edgewood and Aberdeen are like arch rivals. So he goes to the arch rival high school. I don't even know how he did that, by the way, but he goes to the arch rival high school. And every year I just had this, every time we played him, I'm like, I should have been playing for you. Like, so the competitive spirit with you two, I don't know how you guys maneuver, you being competitive. I know he was super competitive. So I know that makes for an interesting household.
Well, so I'll give you a little bit of backstory just quickly. When we left Edgewood initially, so that was in 92, we went to Charles County because there was a new school opening. Westlake High School was opening, and he had an opportunity to coach there. And we went for a year, and it wasn't a fit for either one of us. So we came back, and Edgewood had a coach, and Aberdeen did not. And so that's how he ended up at Aberdeen. But I don't think we ever competed with each other. I think we really, we got to know each other at school when we were both in there on a Saturday. He was in with kids watching film after a Friday night and making posters. And I don't know what I was doing, something. And, we figured if we were both in school on a Saturday morning, maybe there was something to this. So, that he is very understanding and supportive of the long hours I wanted to put in, and that was reciprocated. And I think, that helped us to have a good marriage all these many years now.
Hey, I think two of the finest people that I know. Like I said, you yourself, I knew about your husband before I knew about you, but there's not anybody in that community, Edgewood, Aberdeen, I know that will have anything negative to say about the Reillys at all. So you guys have definitely left your mark. Again, I'm so humbled and proud to be able to come full circle, do this interview with you. I know you'll stay in contact. I don't have to say all that because I'll have more stuff to run by you and everything else. But thank you, Mrs. Reilly, so much for taking time to do this interview. Love you. I respect you. And I wish you well.
Well, Michael, thank you. And I would be remiss if I didn't give you some props, because it's, you and I encountered each other probably 5 or 6 years ago now when I was doing some professional learning work, and you walked in and I thought, I know that big guy. I had to go look at the sign-in sheet and I thought, my goodness. And so it is certainly does my heart good to see how you have thrived and just how wonderful you are. So thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, madam.
Take good care.
All right.
you.